In this video, we'll talk about monopolies. A monopoly market is characterized by having one firm that produces everything in the market. And of course, in terms of product differentiation, if there's only one firm producing the product, you know exactly who that is. So to contrast that from the perfect competitor, there's no close substitutes for this one product, significant barriers to entry, so someone can't just pick up and start selling this. And this results in substantial market power and control over price. So unlike the perfect competitors, where we assumed that there were so many of them that they had no control over price, here we have one firm, they have perfect price setting power. And so, once again, unlike the perfect competitors, here we have the potential for long run economic profit. The sources of market power, the reasons that the monopoly can be the only producer in the market, are called barriers to entry. So how can barriers to entry arise? Well, you'd have some sort of legal control of a key input of production. We might have large fixed costs to start up. If you think of maybe like the railroad industry, why can't you just start producing a train service? You're going to need a lot of stuff in order to start selling train service. You need railroad lines, trains, a whole bunch of labor, things like that. So large fixed costs of production can result in monopoly, or again, patents, copyrights, other legal action which limit others from entering the market. Okay, so like all other producers, the monopolist's goal is to maximize profit. And just like before, profit is going to be maximized where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So that rule does not depend on what type of market structure we are. It's more of a mathematical rule, right? We talked about in previous videos, if marginal revenue is higher than marginal cost, profit is not maximized because you could sell one more unit, bring in more revenue than it would cost you, and make additional profit. Right? If marginal cost is higher than marginal revenue, profit is not maximized. You could sell less, and each one it would be costing you less and less because marginal cost is increasing as quantity goes up. All right, so profit maximization, MR equals MC, it's true for monopolists. But unlike the perfect competitor, the monopolist sells to the entire downward sloping market demand. And so maybe it's easier to see this on the actual graph. Let's have a look at this downward sloping monopolist demand. Right here on the left, we see the perfectly competitive firm. The perfectly competitive firm is so small that it just sells to a local market, and it can sell whatever quantity it wants to on this market at the market price. So again, thinking about something like toothpicks. Okay, the monopolist faces the entire downward sloping market demand. And so the idea here is that let's look at a price of $40. What is a demand curve? A demand curve, from all the way back in our first modules, shows us at each market price what is the quantity demanded. And so this demand curve is showing us that at a market price, the quantity demand at the market price of $40, the quantity demanded is 10. So can this monopolist sell an 11th unit at the price of $40? No, the demand curve shows us that there is not an 11th buyer at the price of $40. At a price of $40, only 10 are demanded. Okay, so for the monopolist faces the entire downward sloping demand curve. And what this means is that from a point on the demand curve, if the monopolist wants to sell a higher quantity, here, if the monopolist wants to sell the 11th unit, they have to lower their price because we don't have a buyer in the market willing to purchase an 11th unit at $40. They want to sell 11 units, they have to drop the price down to $38. All right, so as a result, marginal revenue for the monopolists is not equal to price. It's lower than price. If they want to sell one more unit, they have to drop the price. This is not the case for the perfect competitor. All right, so again, if you're ever looking at a graph or a problem and you see this flat demand curve where demand is equal to marginal revenue, you know for sure that you're looking at the perfectly competitive firm. And then over here, if you have a marginal revenue curve that's steeper than demand, often we're looking at the monopolist or monopolistically competitive markets. All right, perfect competition is the only one where you'll see this flat demand curve. All right, so our steps to maximizing profit, exactly the same as what we had before. First, we know that the quantity, which maximizes profit, is one where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So here's our marginal revenue curve. It is this orange one here. Our marginal cost curve is blue. Where are they equal? They're equal at this point right here. And that is a quantity of, on this graph, 50. All right. So now, in the perfect competitor case, we already had price. Market price was just given to us. The monopolist could charge this price here where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, call that like 15 or something, but they don't have to charge that price. They have price setting power. So what is the monopolist going to do? The monopolist is going to say, well, given the demand in this market, we know that the price at which we could sell 50 units, we figured out the optimal quantity, it's 50. What's the maximum price we can charge to consumers in this market? Well, the demand curve shows us that. All right, so here, the maximum price that they can charge in the market, where 50 units will be purchased by consumers, according to our demand, is this price, 30. So, ignore the numbers, I guess, for now. It doesn't matter what the actual numbers are. What was the process? We found MC equals MR right here. We figured out what the quantity was. And then we just took that quantity up to the demand curve, and we find our price based on the demand for this quantity. And, what is the maximum price the monopolist can charge and sell 50 units on this market? Demand curve shows us that. All right, so finally, we can figure out what it costs the monopolists to produce 50 units in this case, or the profit maximizing quantity, and then we can find profit based on that, right? So here, what is the average total cost of producing 50 units? We take 50 units up to our average total cost curve. It cost us, it looks like, $20 per unit to produce. All right, so what's our profit? Per unit, we're selling each at a market price of $30, and it cost us $20 to produce. So our per unit profit is $30 minus $20, price minus average total cost. And then we can multiply that by how many we sold. We sold 50 units. So here is our area of profit. All right, so understanding those steps, again, those are the same steps regardless of market type, market structure. The difference between monopoly and perfect competition is that in perfect competition, price is equal to marginal revenue, and it's equal to the demand curve. It's all just that horizontal line. So once we find MC equals MR, once we find that quantity, we already know the price. Whereas here in the monopolist, we set MR equals MC, we find our optimal quantity, and then we have to figure out, based on the demand curve, what is the maximum price the monopolist can charge for the optimal quantity.